everyone. I would like to thank the Algonquin for allowing us to perform this signing ceremony on their territory and allowing us on their territory. My praise goes to them for welcoming us, having us be with them. I want to welcome Minister Hajdu and her staff, as well as our board of directors from the Lands Advisory Board, and all the staff that are available. Welcome the media. I'm honored to deliver the opening prayer. I was given tobacco on behalf of the board to start us off in a good way. It's always helpful for us to go through things in a right mind and to have guidance when we make decisions like what we're doing here today. And I've had the good fortune of being involved with this process since its inception. I recall the first signing ceremony that we had, welcoming the initial framework agreement with the chiefs. I hosted as a chief at that time, February 12th, 1993, on my First Nation Chippewas, Georgian Island, and it was Minister Irwin then, who signed on behalf of the government, and he did just a little funny short story. Our community is an island community, and we were in the process of negotiating for a new car ferry, and Minister Irwin, we were having some difficulty, not with Minister Irwin, but with getting the talks going on the new car ferry, and Minister Irwin flew in on a helicopter. Miko was his assistant then. And I said, well, Mr. Minister, I know you realize what we have to go through in our travel to get here, and we could come up with a couple of options. You could either help us attain a new car ferry, or you could get us a few helicopters so our people can go. By the Monday, we were working on getting a new car ferry. So I want to thank Minister Irwin, previous Minister Irwin, who's since passed. It shows the work that we've done, and the fact that we can work together with the government as a people, and to do benefits that help access our people and promote goodwill, and we have the capabilities of doing that, and the initiatives like the framework agreement have given us the capacity to work forward, and I acknowledge the good work that all the government has done in working with us. So if I could start with a prayer. Heavenly Father, I thank you for everyone being here today. I give you all the praise and glory for all that has been done. I thank you for giving our leaders the knowledge and the goodwill to move forward and work together for the common good of all people, our people, our friends from government, and I believe what we are accomplishing here will go on onto future generations and make life much better for them, and how it's improved our communities. I acknowledge our leadership that we have, that has worked so hard on behalf of their communities, and those that are involved in the framework agreement. And I acknowledge Canada for their hard work in supporting us and working and cooperating as a government-to-government basis and respecting our people. I give you all the praise and glory, and I thank you for having us here today, and I wish everyone a safe journey home, and the communities be safe after this while we're here doing our business. Amen.
Thank you. Can I proceed to the signing of the understanding?
Okay. We're signing first. Picking? Okay. Signing complete.
Turn to Chief Robert Louie, Chair of the Lands Advisory Board and Chief of West Bank First Nation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bill, for your prayer and opening comments. It's good to be reminded of the history of how we started in land management. So those were good stories. So thank you very much, Bill. Vahaskahalt, Inch Isquisimu, Kinomiham, West Bank First Nation. My ancestral Okanagan name, Okanagan Silk's name is Simu. It means connected to the land. And the work that we're doing is very much connected to the land, and I thank my Stemtima, my grandmother, for honoring and giving me that name as a young boy. It stuck with me all this time, and I value that honor to this day. So for that. I too thank the Algonquin people, the traditional peoples of this land. I hold my hands up to the ancestors, to the people, for what they've done to protect these lands and allowing us to be here today. This is a very, very important day today. When we're talking about money and commitment of monies, it's always important. And certainly we're grateful for this MOU funding for First Nation land management. Madam Minister, we want to thank you for your commitment and your government's commitment, for your ongoing commitment for the framework agreement and land management. The operational and developmental funding directed here and over these 5 years will greatly assist our peoples, our First Nation communities across Canada, to exercise land governance and protection of their reserve lands. This year marks the 28th year since the historic signing of the framework agreement. And to use the words of my good friend Austin Bear, former chief of Muscadet and our chairman of our resource center, it's been a wild ride. That is very, very true. 28 years has gone by and slipped by, it seems to be, in moments at times. But we have accomplished a lot. And it's been hard work, dedication, and commitment by First Nations across Canada. We started in the 1990s with only 13 First Nations as signatories. We now have 211 First Nation signatories. And we have 118 land codes that have been developed and ratified by First Nation communities. That translates to over 1.2 million acres of land, somewhere in the magnitude of 490,000 hectares of land that has been removed from the colonial outdated Indian Act. And that's very, very important. Important land governance and decision-making under land codes is now being accomplished in days and weeks, not years, as was under the Indian Act. And that's a big difference when we're comparing governance structures and what First Nations can do collectively after and having the recognition to manage their own lands and rights and resources. First Nations have proven very clearly that good things can happen when we make our own decisions for the benefit of our members, our neighbors, the whole country benefits. The framework agreement works. The MOU funding directed that supports this initiative creates a positive opportunity for the improvement of living conditions for First Nations across this country, and it ultimately improves the overall fabric of the Society of Canada. Everyone benefits. So on behalf of the First Nations signatories to the framework agreement, we are sincerely grateful for this. We thank you, Madam Minister. We look forward to expanding our productive working relationship. It's been good, and let's carry on with this wild ride. Lemlem.
Lemlem as well, and it's so great to be with all of you here on the territory, unceded territory of Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. And you know, every time I say unceded territory, I remind people that what it means is stolen. Because it's such a nice word, doesn't it? It just slips off the language and the tongue of politicians. But that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about regaining control over land that was not just dispossessed, but often, controlled deeply by an Indian Act and a Canadian colonial government that really, you told the story of how long this used to take. I don't think that was a bug of the system. I think that was a feature of the system. And I'm really, really thrilled to be here with you today. The first time I met with you, I really didn't understand what you did, to be fully transparent with you. But over the years, with the help of Keith Kahn, who's in the audience today, Senior Administrator with Indigenous Services Canada, and many others, I've just come to realize how important the work is that you do to support First Nations communities on that road to self-determination, and critically in their ability to manage their own lands and resources in a way that is self-determined and focused on the success of their communities and the generations to come. This is progress, I believe, on the path to reconciliation, but I always remind my peers in all parties that reconciliation can never be defined by the colonizer. It has to be defined by Indigenous peoples. And so it gives me courage and heart to hear both the elders' words about the history of LAB, how far we've come, your words, Chief Louie. That to me are, those words mean something. It means that we are on a good path, and it means that when the government of Canada and governments really at every level let go of controlling tools, mechanisms, and laws and turn over those rights to create those tools and own those tools and develop those tools and evolve those tools to Indigenous partners, magic happens, actually. And you're absolutely right, Chief Louie. It is good for all of Canada, and we need to keep saying that loudly, all of us, Indigenous partners, non-Indigenous partners, that when everybody in this country has a true, fair, and chance to succeed, when people feel that their worth and their value and their purpose can be fully actualized, that's when Canada is truly going to be unstoppable. And I think actually until we get to that place, we are challenged. And so this is an important piece of that work. So today, I'm very excited to say that the agreement that we signed is a new 5-year agreement that increases funding for communities that want to manage their own lands. And so it's exciting to hear you talk about how accelerated the process is now, and you will have the financial resources then to support communities to be able to do that work quickly. Budget 2023 invests $187 million over 5 years and $34 million ongoing to support communities to manage their own lands. And as I think the Chief and Elder have spoken about, this will have direct impact on communities immediately. There's an immediate 21% funding increase for most First Nations that already have their own land codes. There's a 50% increase to support communities that want to opt out of the Indian Act and to create their own land code. And we anticipate that this increase will help up to 50 more First Nations create those land codes. When I was trying to work on my remarks for this event, I kept saying, you know, the way that I've learned to do my job as a politician is to tell stories. And I kept saying, what does this mean, though, to the average person listening today or reading the newspaper article tomorrow? And so I asked for a few examples, and I'm going to give you a few examples of what this actually means to communities. For example, in Fort McKay First Nation, this capacity to manage their own lands meant that they could clean up an unauthorized dump site and remove over 11,900 kilograms of waste from their reserve lands for disposal at an authorized disposal site. So we're talking about the direct health and wellness of not just the land, but the people in that community. It also means a place like Lakamal First Nation could hire an emergency management team to update the community's emergency plan and provide related training for the community. It means that communities can attract investments in the way that they want to, in the way that works for their community. It means that they can do business and make transactions according to their own rules and to their own pace. For example, Shiway Village progressed on the development of a residential community with over 100 homes built to date. So it can accelerate the kinds of infrastructure gap closure that is enormously challenging, and all of you know the size of the gap across this country. And indeed, those tools of self-determination help communities move even more quickly to address those significant infrastructure gaps and create the kinds of communities where people not only want to stay, but where they want to come back to and raise their families and contribute to the ongoing growth of the community. So this is a very exciting announcement. I believe it's about protection for the next generation as well. It is about the knowledge that Indigenous people have always had, that we need to be thinking 7 generations out. So I'm very excited about this piece of work that I believe helps the Government of Canada to shed colonial habits and leave the Indian Act behind and avoid a one-size-fits-all solution that often and sometimes well-meaning commentators want to see happen, but that Indigenous peoples and First Nations people in particular know just won't meet the criteria that they need for their own communities. So thank you very much. I'm really thrilled to be here with you today.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Chief. On va maintenant se tourner vers les questions. So please, one question and one follow-up question per journalist, and please identify yourself and the media you're working for.
Hi, Joy.
Hi. So I have a question about Jordan's principal actually. So according to reports from CBC, Indigenous Services Canada has only been upholding Jordan's principle 33% of the time. This apparently is a very big note for the NDP and their support of the budget. So just wondering what ISC, any new initiatives going forward to remedy this.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I think I should start with the good news, which is that Jordan's Principle requests have grown exponentially since the Government of Canada, under the Liberal leadership, began to honor Jordan's Principle. And as, this is a program that, as communities become aware of, as families become aware of, as many different agencies become aware of, we're getting more and more applicants. So it's a good problem to have in some ways, because people know that those services are available and that, that there is support for that. The challenge is that the volume of services, which can range from a very small request for an item, a particular service, a one-time service, all the way up to really complex requests that might be for a child that has very specific and ongoing special needs cares, really are overwhelming the department. And so we have been working with Indigenous partners on ways that we can streamline those requests. It isn't a question of the funds being available. The funds are available and the drawdown is there. And we have the ability to pay and remit those payments to the variety of partners that are providing the services. The challenge is really managing the volume. And so I would say that the deputy is working very hard with her team to look for ways that we, for example, could automate some easier requests, for lack of a better words, for smaller routine requests, or ways that we could group requests together. But I think the real solution is actually the transformation that's happening through actually empowering First Nations communities, agencies to take control of Jordan's Principle themselves and have a direct relationship with the client rather than client, family, person, rather than go through the federal process. So it's really all options are on the table, and we're working really diligently to get those requests moved through the system as quickly as possible.
Do you have a follow-up?
I'm sure this isn't news to you all, but there's a lot of criticism of moving away from the Indian Act and grassroots. What would you say to those folks who are saying that initiatives like this are reducing the federal government's duties to First Nations?
If I may, moving away from the Indian Act has to be looked in the context of where people are. Where we were historically, thousands of years ago, our peoples were self-governing. We looked after ourselves. We protected our lands, we stood up, we fought to do so, and we did the right thing. We maintained the lands. Lands were pristine, waters were clean, the resources were there, the trees were revered, animals respected. All of this happened in the context of being self-governing. The Indian Act chose to change all that. Change to try and take the Indian, take the Indigenous out of us, put us as wards of the state. Is that good? Did that accomplish what it was set out to do? Is it fair that our children enact? Is that good? I challenge the thinking and the rationale for that being good. We have an opportunity and we're implementing that opportunity. We're self-governing. We are the decision makers of our lands. Now we have hope and we have opportunity. That's what we want. That's what we had in the past. So, no, we cannot be wards of the state. We cannot be dependent upon decision-making that rests with others. We have to take charge. That decision-making responsibility is with us. And I very clearly challenge the thinking. And I ask the youth now to say, what do you want in the future? Do you want to be under the control of others? Do you want that decision-making to happen? Or do you want to make your own choices? I know for my people and the people we represent being self-governing, for the land code communities, they want the latter. They want to make their own decisions. That is our future, that's our destiny. So that is a response.
And then going off of that, the opportunity that you're talking about, I'm wondering if one of you can speak to a specific community that has their own land code and the success that you've seen with them.
I'd like to ask that to my good friend Austin Bear. I think he has a lot to say.
Thank you, Robert. And quite often I do. But today, I'll keep in mind the purpose we're here, and I'll keep my comments short. Just rephrase the question so I perfectly understand what you're asking.
Yeah, like if there's a community that sticks out to you that has their own land code and the success that they've had moving away from the Indian Act.
I can speak personally of First Nations, but I can speak generally of First Nations that have benefited from Nova Scotia to Vancouver Island and to Northwest Territories, generally. But specifically, my own First Nation has benefited from the implementation of the Framework Agreement and the passage of our land code. And it's not necessarily always economic development is what you wish to achieve. That is truly a benefit. But there are other factors that are equally as important. And for my First Nation and to our elders and the direction of our elders was, and the elders knew best how the Indian Act impacted our First Nation and our families, particularly with the imposition of the Indian Act on our livelihood, and with respect to, of course, residential schools. And our elders said and approved. And when our old chief spoke, he said, to rid ourselves of the Indian Act, the time is now. We've suffered long enough. That is in itself is a benefit to our First Nations. On the economic benefits, I can speak of my sister nation in the Saskatoon Tribal Council, Whitecap, Dakota. very successful in economic development. Another First Nation within our tribal council with great strides and growth in economic development, our sister nation, Mistawasses, doing great things in economic development and other ways and means of bringing better quality of life to their members. And using those 2 or 3 examples, I could go from Nova Scotia, Membertou, to West Bank in the Okanagan, to First Nations and the Stolo Nations in the Fraser Valley, and on and on and on. There is good stories about success and the achievement that we were all seeking. Under the Indian Act, that is simply not possible. While there is some success with First Nations still under the Indian Act, I think they could realize even greater success if they chose to accept and sign on to the framework agreement. But that's a First Nations decision. Not mine, not ours, no one else except that First Nation. Thank you.
I just have one final question. So budget 2024 opened up the sale or the use of federal lands. I'm just wondering if there's any conversation about opening the signs for First Nations use or for First Nations.
That's a really good question. I don't know the answer to that question, but we'll get back to you about that. I will just say, though, that I have reiterated, and I know the Prime Minister expects this, that reconciliation is really an important piece of every federal agency and every federal department's role, that it is no longer solely the responsibility of the ministers that have direct responsibilities to First Nations. And so increasingly what I'm seeing across the federal family, and I see Keith nodding, which makes me hopeful, is that federal departments are engaging and creating relationships with First Nations and Indigenous partners. And so, for example, in infrastructure, we have seen through the Housing Accelerator Fund, many First Nations apply and many successful First Nations in that fund. I know that that's happening across other general funds and programs that the federal government is offering. And I think that's important that First Nations realize this, that there are funds and opportunities through every department at the federal, in the federal family, employment services, Department of Transport, you name it, that have different kinds of streams of funding that may not be quote unquote designated for Indigenous priorities, but that Indigenous applicants are welcome and encouraged to apply for. Because the more applicants to those funds, the more opportunities there are for equitable distribution of them.
Any other question? Right. Ça conclut notre point de presse. That concludes the presser.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great stories. Thank you so much.
I have almost forgot. We have a token of a gift here, Madam Minister, that we'd like to present to you. So on behalf of our land code communities, land management across this country, if you would accept this gift here of this carved wooden feather, and we have some tobacco and a card in there, but it's our honor to present this to you, and we say, Limlim, thank you for all
thank
you
you.
do and your government support in helping us with land management.
Thank you very much, Chief Louie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's an honor.
Limlim.
Thank you. Beautiful. Wow. Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we have a meeting now.
Yes.
That's okay.
Yes. Thank you
Let's go
for
do
your time on that.
Yes. That went well. Thank you.